Welcome to Raging Moderates. I'm Scott Galloway.
And I'm Jessica Tarlov.
So we've got a major development in the shooting of Charlie Kirk. Authorities say the suspect, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, is now in custody at the Utah County Jail, facing initial charges that include aggravated murder. Investigators say Robinson's dad came forward last night, telling a family friend that Robinson had essentially confessed to the killing. That friend then alerted police, which set off the arrest. Officials also revealed new details about the investigation. A family member told them Robinson had expressed hostility toward Kirk in the past, and when police searched, they found a bolt-action rifle wrapped in a towel, along with shell casings engraved with disturbing slogans, including one that read, "Hey fascist, catch." Jess, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I'm glad that he's been apprehended. Happy about that, and that it'll give some solace maybe to Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica. In terms of the profile of the kid, I don't want to say bog standard in any way because most people don't go out and kill people, but like a terminally online person. On the shell casings, you had everything from the Ciao Bella, the kind of anti-fascist part of this, to references to video games and furry memes. The game, I think, is Helldivers 2, which I have not played myself, but he was very active in Discord channels, even talking to people in there about this, apparently, that like the rifle was left in that wooded area, where he dropped it when he ran on foot. And Governor Cox, he had a lot of important messages that he conveyed. I was particularly struck when he said, I had hoped that this was someone not from here, because this feels so un-American, so evil that you almost wish that this was a foreign enemy that came in to do this. But he also said social media is a cancer. And I would encourage all of you to get offline and get out in the world. And I think he said, and touch grass. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, like you, I'm glad they caught the guy, and it starts to create some sense of closure, if you will. But it just fits the profile, because if you were to try and disarticulate why something like this happens, and you'll never totally get rid of it. These political assassinations happen all over the world. But the reason we have such a greater propensity of gun deaths here in the United States, including political assassinations, where I think basically 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 presidents is shot at, is really 3 legs of the stool. The first is that I believe the most sophisticated companies in the world, creating the most shareholder value and driving the markets, we don't like to talk about this because it gets in the way of our anti-capitalist rhetoric, have a profit incentive to enrage people, to figure out what you're interested in, figure out your political leanings, and then take you to an extreme and start showing you increasingly incendiary content that gets you angry at the other side. We have connected the health of our economy to rage. I'm not saying these tech leaders wanted to do this, but there's just no getting around it. Search your own. As Darth Vader said, search your feelings. You know this to be true. We are increasingly pissed off and beginning to believe that our enemy is our neighbor. Because if they don't share our political beliefs, we start seeing algorithms that show that people on the far right, or people not like us, are evil and wrong. And it just stirs up emotion. Nothing creates engagement like cute ads or cute videos with kittens and an articulate person compelling you to hate someone who doesn't share your belief. So we have the largest economy and the most profitable companies in history, with godlike technology and Paleolithic institutions to regulate them, getting everyone enraged. 2, we have young men in this country who are increasingly isolated, a lack of economic and romantic opportunities, and they dive into this maelstrom, this downward spiral, this vortex of weirdness and enragement and hate called online. This kid was on Discord, increasingly online, not out there making friends, mentors, mates that serve as guardrails to tell him, quite frankly, what the fuck are you thinking, or to show him that maybe people are less evil than you think, right? Increasingly online means increasingly subject to conspiracy theory, and young men need guardrails. And then the third thing is just easy access to guns. And I said this yesterday. Since Charlie Kirk was killed, there have been more people shot and killed in the United States than will be killed in all of the United Kingdom this entire year. And my kind of final thought here is, and this is snarky, I got the feeling that many of the far-right commentators, including some of the people you work with, are hugely disappointed that this wasn't a trans person on AOC's staff.
Yeah.
That like every other political murder in American history, except for Sirhan, who was Palestinian in heritage, it was a white, heterosexual, young man. So my question to all these people on TikTok saying this is war, are they officially today declaring war on young, white, heterosexual Mormon males?
Who come from families that vote like them. Because
That are
he's
Republican.
unaffiliated, but his family is not. He comes from a law enforcement family. His father's a sheriff. And we should note that, his father turning him in is quite something. And, we've seen more cases where parents have been blamed and prosecuted for the crimes that their children perpetrated because of easy access to guns or ignoring the signs. Seems very clear here that Mr. Robinson, the patriarch of the family, was not about to have any of that, and that he was going to make sure that his son did the right thing, or that he made sure that his son was brought to justice. I totally agree with you. It's been reported, and obviously this is a moving investigation, so we'll see, but that he was a college dropout, only went for one semester. Off of social media posts, it looks like he scored very highly on the ACTs when he took them. In the top 1%, got a score between 34 to 36. This is someone who could have had a very different future. And he ended up living with his parents and going out and carrying out this incredibly tragic political assassination. One thing that hasn't been discussed that much, and I saw it as a rumbling online, but I think is worth shining some light on, is that people were taking kind of too small of a view of what the modern right looks like right now, and not understanding the differences between, for instance, like the Nick Fuentes wing versus the Charlie Kirk wing, which were at odds with each other. A lot of that based in whether you support Israel or were anti-Semitic. And Nick Fuentes, obviously, modern day Nazi ideology going on there. More information will come out, but they're certainly investigating any ties to far-right groups more in the mold of Nick Fuentes than in Charlie Kirk's. And, he started talking about this a couple days before, said, Charlie Kirk is going to be in town. And I don't know if it was him or someone else in his family saying it's all really hateful rhetoric that Charlie has been putting out there. And maybe that was the final straw of when he went to do this. I also want to touch on what you said about the disappointment that this isn't, a trans shooter with blue hair that fits some caricature of the left that really only exists in the recesses of the online world. I hate that that's the case. And I also hate that the president will not be willing to acknowledge that reality is not what he says that it is. And this is a moment where we really need to kind of take a step back and say, now we have political assassinations going out. And Charlie Kirk, for all intents and purposes, is part of this administration. I mean, his casket flew back to Arizona on Air Force Two. He was instrumental in getting J.D. Vance picked as a vice presidential candidate, very close with the whole Trump family. This needs to be taken way more seriously than it has been by a lot of people. And Bernie Sanders posted a great video about 4 minutes talking about how unacceptable this is and that we don't live in a free country and in a democracy if things like this happen. And I hope that more people take that perspective on this.
Yeah, and just because I just can't get over the amount of online chatter and these head up their ass people who don't want to look at data, whether it's Representative Mace or Fox hosts, immediately jumping to a conclusion that this was the radical left, including the president saying that's the radical left. I just want to go through political assassinations here. Abraham Lincoln was shot by a 26-year-old white male. James Garfield, a 39-year-old white male. William McKinley, a 20-year-old white male. John F. Kennedy, a 24-year-old, wait for it, white male. Bobby Kennedy, a 24-year-old, some people would say Palestinian. Martin Luther King Jr., a 40-year-old white male. George Wallace, a 21-year-old white male. Ronald Reagan, a 25-year-old white male. Gabby Giffords, a 22-year-old white male. Charlie Kirk, a 22-year-old white male. As far as we know, all of these people were heterosexual. So let's move to solutions. The most obvious one is that we need something resembling sane gun control. In Australia and in the UK, when they had mass shootings, they passed sensible gun control, gun registration, people can check mental health checks, no assault rifles. They no longer have the mass shootings that we have twice a week in the U.S. And two, young men who are more risk aggressive, more prone to going down a rabbit hole, isolating socially, the young men need more intervention and more resources such that they connect to other people. The culprit here is, number one, guns, and number two, it is young men who are not establishing relationships because they have the deepest pocketed companies in the world whose mission is to convince them they can have a reasonable facsimile of life online and to slowly but surely start sequestering from other humans. This is guns, and this is a lack of mammalia, of human contact, of young men. And if you want to play identity politics, folks on the far right, you need to declare war on young white men. And let's skip the war part and move to the Marshall Plan and think about a massive amount of resources that need to go to the specific identifiable problem, gun control and young men who literally come off the rails because they have no guardrails in terms of relationships, because they have companies convincing them they don't need relationships, that they can find everything they need on an increasingly incendiary, toxic online forum and environments that radicalize them.
Yeah, totally agree. And the social media companies have been hauled in front of the hill for the damage that they're doing to young people, but mostly young women. And the fact that there are whistleblower reports that show that they knew that they were creating these horrible environments for these sometimes teenage girls, leading to all sorts of desperate and self-harming behavior. Probably time to have another meeting on the Hill where we talk about what goes on these sites and the effect that it has in radicalizing young men who then have the access to weapons to carry out something like this.
It's pretty basic. Social media convinces teenage girls to harm themselves, and it convinces young men, young adult men, to harm others.
Perfectly said.
We appreciate your time, and we will keep you updated as we get more information. Thanks for your time, Jess.
Yeah.